Hey everyone, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. So today's video, I wanted to come on here and talk to you guys a little bit about my induction for labor. So I just posted recently a video, which was the vlog that I did literally over a year ago when my baby was born, about the hospital vlog and like the labor and delivery, all of that kind of stuff. And even though I did like a birth vlog and I was doing the induction during that time, I didn't really go too much into depth. Like looking back at it, I realized that I didn't offer that many details in terms of like the actual induction process itself. I did mention like a few things here and there, but not a lot. So I wanted to do a more in-depth, like sit down kind of talking video, just going more into detail about like what the induction process actually looked like for me. So let's go ahead and get into it. So I will first start off by saying that I did not want to be induced. I was due on June 24th of 2023, and my induction was scheduled for July 3rd. So they did tell me that the latest they would let me go was like 10 days. And that's pretty much what ended up happening. My baby was born on July 4th. And so we ended up going in at that time. And you know what? I was just kind of like, let's just do it. It is what it is. Like I said, I didn't necessarily want to, but it's, what ended up having to happen, obviously. And, as the time got closer, I started to get a little bit more comfortable with the idea of an induction. I was just like, you know what, at least I kind of know that I'm going in for it and things are going to be kind of set in stone, as opposed to like anxiously awaiting labor happening on its own. Again, that's what I wanted to begin with. However, as the time got closer to the induction, I started to like ease into the idea a little bit more, but I was still very nervous about it, especially because I did want to go natural. And I knew that one of the big induction medicines is Pitocin, which I really did like not want to have to do, but I knew that if I did have to get that, then the contractions would be like pretty intense pretty quickly, and I felt like I was going to end up needing an epidural, which I did not want. So all of that to say that obviously I ended up having to go into, in for an induction anyway, even though it's not like, it wasn't my first choice, but it's what ended up happening. So anyway, this is how my day started. So we were called in at 7:30. So I was told that we could be called in from anywhere of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. They called us a little after 6 o'clock a.m. and told us that we were going to be scheduled to come in at 7:30 a.m. So we got there and they did like all of the, check-in process. They hooked me up with my IVs, did all of that kind of stuff. It was a lot of like getting stuff situated and ready, and then like just talking about what the process was actually going to be like. And there was a lot of what ifs because it was just dependent on so many different factors. So that was all kind of like the first, I would say maybe even like 3 hours. And then the actual like induction stuff started, I would say closer to like 12:45. I was told that I was allowed to eat during early labor, which I was really excited about because they did say that inductions could last anywhere from like 3 to 5 days, which was a little bit scary. But they did say that I just couldn't eat during active labor. So early labor was fine. I know that in the morning I was, eating something and I was like, oh my goodness, this might be like the last thing I eat until the baby is here. But thankfully, like I said, I was able to get food. So I was ordering some stuff while I was still in early labor. So at 12:45, and yes, by the way, I do have notes written down because I don't remember everything. Like I said, this was over a year ago. So I was looking back at my little notes and in my documents. But yeah, so it said at 12:45, we got the Cook's balloon placed, which is like a Foley balloon. And that pretty much tries to help you start getting dilated. As time went on, I was beginning to have contractions. And even though I was having contractions, they were not consistent at first. And then they started coming about every 2 minutes. Also, once the balloon was placed, I was also administered Cytotec, I think it's called. I also have written down, or misopros. I don't know how to pronounce these things. I think it's the same thing though, but it's just like basically an induction medicine to try to help move things along. So that was pretty much like the majority of the first day that I was in there, which was again July 3rd. And that was like really it. They were just trying to see like how well I was going to dilate, and I wasn't really getting far, honestly. Like I said, I was still able to eat during that time. I did have people visiting, which was really nice because it was helping the time go, because it seemed like I really wasn't making much progress. And then the next morning we started Pitocin. So I had the balloon. I don't really know exactly when the balloon was like got taken out. I think it can only go like a certain amount and then it needs to be removed. But since I was really not progressing much, like I was making some progress, but not quite as much as they would have liked to have seen. The next morning we did have to start Pitocin, which again, I was not excited about. Thankfully, during that time, I was moved into the actual room that I was going to be delivering in. So it was just like hospital like availability, I guess, like for beds and all of that. They just ended up having to move me into the room I would actually be delivering in. And so we were in there. I did have a laboring ball. I had a comb. I was doing counter pressure to relieve the pain from the contractions. And during that time, like with the first medicine and all of that, I was feeling them. They weren't super painful. They were uncomfortable, but it wasn't really anything I couldn't handle. And then once the Pitocin started, I actually was feeling the contractions even less. And I was like, okay, what is going on here? Because I heard that this is supposed to be really intense and I like wasn't feeling them at first. Like I felt maybe something here and there, but like I barely was feeling anything. And then they started upping it and upping it and upping it. Then they started getting really intense. So like I said, I was trying to use my comb technique and do the laboring ball. I was trying different positions of like sitting. I was walking around. I was just trying to do whatever I could, drinking lots of water and popsicles and all that kind of stuff to just really keep things going. Once I was there and in active labor, like I said, I couldn't eat, but I could still do water and popsicles and stuff like that. So I was trying to do as much of those things as I could just to keep myself hydrated and hopefully like that would, help my body a little bit. I don't know. So that was, like I said, on the 4th, July 4th morning, but I was still only dilated like 4 to 5 centimeters. So definitely still not as much progress as they would have liked to have seen. During this time, like over these few hours, because like I said, that was in the morning. So over the hours of having the Pitocin and them like gradually increasing the amount, the contractions started to get really bad. So like I said, at first I didn't really feel them, but then they came on quickly. They came on very intensely as well. And I got in so much pain, like so incredibly quickly. It felt like all of my energy was just being depleted. And it was like a scary feeling because I knew that I was going to need energy still to push out the baby. It's not just like the contractions that you need to work through. It's also the actual delivery part. And so I was getting a little bit nervous because I was so exhausted and I was in so much pain. So around 3 p.m., I did end up getting the epidural. They did tell me that like if I didn't get the epidural, then it was going to be like this for a much longer time. Was I pressured into it? I don't know, but I did end up getting it. And it definitely, like, again, wasn't my first choice to get an epidural. But as soon as I got the epidural, I ended up falling immediately asleep, which was really nice. It was like the best nap ever. And yeah, obviously it did its job, but it's still something that I was so iffy about. I was so nervous even during that process of like it actually happening. Yeah, it was really scary. So after that, I finally was able to relax, so like I said, and fall asleep. And then once I did get the epidural, they ended up decreasing the Pitocin. I have that they decreased it from 18 to 14, whatever that means. I don't know. Again, I was just looking back at like the medical documents. By the way, I am not saying any of this to like try to deter or scare anybody away from the epidural. If that is something that you are like wanting to do, have your heart set on, by all means, that is your decision. This is just like a personal conviction. I really didn't want to have to do it for myself, just because I have like medical and medicine anxiety. And so it was just something I didn't personally want to have to do. But like, please, I totally understand that pain is no joke. So if like the epidural is something you go in knowing for sure you want, then please do not let any of what I just said make you feel like bad or guilty or anything. That's not my intention. I'm just like trying to share my own experience here. So after I woke up from my little nap, of course they were like still checking everything. They kept checking baby's heart rate and all of that. And they did tell me that the baby's heart rate started decelerating. So that was obviously really scary to hear, that the baby's heart rate was dropping. And, I don't know if it was just from like a bad reaction to the Pitocin or what. I don't know if it was like too much medicine too quickly, which was like another reason why I really didn't want to have to get an induction. But yeah, that was like terrifying. And then they did tell me that I may end up needing a possible emergency C-section, which of course is also really scary because like I just went through all of this, like the past over 24 hours of going through all this medicine and like procedures and all of this, and then to have to get like a C-section was just terrifying because again, I didn't know like what was happening. When you go in for an induction, it's kind of like, okay, we're forcing the baby to come now, right? And so it was all just, it felt very scary. So I just, waited a little bit. They did tell me that I could wait it out for a little bit longer. Obviously, they kept monitoring baby's heart rate, and as long as it stayed at like a certain level, they said that I could kind of wait it out a little bit. And then at 5:45 in my notes, it said that I had, quote unquote, an overwhelming urge to push. And then at 5:47, we started pushing. I remember that we were sitting in there, it was Chandler and I was like, Chan, get the nurse. And I kind of was like laying on my side because they said that that would help things. And so I was laying on my side, and that was the side that I had my IV on. And so I like kind of sat up and told him to go get the nurse, and I was like yelling. So he thought that I ripped out my IV because of how I sat up. He didn't know I was telling him to go get the nurse because I was ready to start pushing. So he went to go get the nurse, and he's like going out there just like, yeah, I think something happened like with her IV. I think it might be uncomfortable or something. And then they come walking back in, and I'm like screaming that this baby is coming out. I'm like, she is ready to be born. So I did push until 6:50. At that point, that's when the doctor came back in. So, I was still like, I was pushing, but it was going to take a while. I was a first-time mom, so that typically, not always, but a lot of times that could mean that it's going to take a little bit longer for the actual pushing process to happen. So the doctor came back in at 6:50. I was just in there with the nurse pushing for a while. And then at 6:55, the baby's heart rate dropped all the way to 60 beats per minute. So it was kind of like in that moment, it's go time. And they ended up having to use a vacuum due to baby's heart. Since the heart rate was dropping, they ended up needing to do a vacuum to finish out the process of the baby being born. And at 7:00 p.m. on the dot, baby girl delivered. So I was in active labor for 3 hours and 45 minutes before pushing, but I was in full labor total for about 30 hours. However, I was in the hospital for the full hospital induction time, almost 36 hours. So that is pretty much everything that happened during my induction process.
Hello, Editing Michelle here. I wanted to quickly come on here because I realized that I left something out that I meant to add, and that is that they did end up breaking my water. I feel like it was sometime after I started the Pitocin because my contractions started getting pretty heavy, but my water still wasn't breaking, so they did have to go in and break my water for me. It's just something that I meant to mention. I completely forgot and left it out, so I wanted to go ahead and add that in here and enjoy the rest of the video.
If I have another baby, I really would prefer not to be induced again. I had a lot of postpartum issues. I had postpartum urinary retention. I was 1 in 500 women that went through postpartum urinary retention that lasted more than 3 days, which is a 0.02% chance of that happening. It was terrifying and an absolute nightmare of an experience. It was so scary and so stressful to go through that as a first-time mom, as just a woman in postpartum territory that is like so many hormones, so many things. You want to bond with your baby, and I'm in and out of doctors' offices, hospitals, wearing catheters for several weeks. It was just awful. And again, I will make a separate video kind of talking more in depth about that because again, it's a very rare thing. But when I was going through it, I was trying to find at least one other person that was also going through it so I didn't feel so alone. And it was kind of hard to come by those stories. So if I can be that person for one other person, I would love to be. So yes, I will make another separate video kind of talking more about that. But yeah, that was pretty much my induction story. And I hope that that helped you guys. If you were going in for an induction, I hope maybe this gave you an idea of what your experience might look like. Obviously, everyone's experience is going to be so different. I just wanted to share my own personal experience so that you guys had something to maybe go off of. Again, I want to just make it very clear one more time that everything I said is my own personal story, feelings, thoughts, emotions. Nothing I said is intended to deter you away from anything that you may be personally feeling. I just wanted to share my experience with you all in hopes that maybe it could help in some way, or maybe if you just were interested and wanted to hear it. So yeah, that is all. Thank you guys so much for watching. I surely hope that you did enjoy this video, and I will see you all in the next one. Have a beautiful and blessed day, everyone. Bye.